Good morning, scholars. Happy Tuesday. We are continuing in our animal classification unit today. By the end of the video, you will turn in Tuesday, October 6th, ELA. Today, we will spend some time talking about nouns, verbs, and adjectives. We'll read chapter 2. There'll be a short read aloud, and then you'll have an exit ticket. So, yesterday we briefly discussed text features. Text features could be diagrams that label places or parts of something discussed in the text, like in this picture. It could be a table of context that gives the reader an overview of what's inside the reader. You will also see bold words throughout our reading, and that shows important concepts or words throughout the text. You'll see a lot of pictures as well with captions that describe what's being shown. We see maps that show specific areas talked about in the text, as well as headings that give the reader information about key topics in a text, like a chapter title. There are also glossaries in our readers, and that gives the definition to unknown words, and charts, which help summarize some information that's within our reader. There are also some words you'll need to know today for the reading. The first definition is an animal with a backbone, and that is a vertebrate. In contrast, we are also going to talk about invertebrates, and those are animals without backbones. And then finally, a characteristic, which is a trait that describes something. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Rattenborough. While you are listening, try to listen to determine how and why scientists classify animals.
Chapter 2. Classifying Living Things. Rattenborough here. Do you remember who I am? I'm here now to help you learn about how scientists sort or classify living things into groups. Since I am an expert on animals, we will focus mainly on animals. First, I'm going to ask you two very important questions. How do you know if something is living or non-living? What important characteristics do all living things have? All living things create energy from food. All living things can have babies or make other living things just like themselves. All living things have a life cycle. They start out small and then grow. All living things change to fit in better with their habitat. Plants make up one group of living things. We know this because plants have the same characteristics that all living things have. Plants create energy from food. They make their own food using the sun, water, and gases in the air. Plants make seeds that become new plants. Plants grow from small seeds into seedlings and become adult plants. Plants can adapt to their habitat. For example, all plants need water, but a cactus in a dry desert does not need as much water as other plants. Animals of all shapes and sizes are living things too. So animals also have the same characteristics that all living things have. Animals get energy from the food they eat. Animals can have babies. Baby animals are small but grow into adult animals. Animals can adapt to their habitat. For example, the fur of polar bears looks white so they can blend in with the snow where they live. Plants and animals are both living things, but plants and animals are different in important ways. For example, animals move from place to place, but plants do not. Scientists study how living things are alike and different and sort or classify them into large groups called kingdoms. There are 5 kingdoms of living things. You have just learned about 2, the plant kingdom and the animal kingdom. You will learn about the other kingdoms in later grades. The living things in each kingdom can be sorted into more specific groups. Scientists study animals within the animal kingdom and classify them by the characteristics they share with other animals. One way scientists classify animals into more specific groups is by checking if an animal has a backbone. Insects do not have backbones, but birds and fish do. So, animals with a backbone are in different, more specific groups within the animal kingdom. Insects make up the largest group in the animal kingdom. But there are other large groups of animals such as birds and fish. You will learn more about other major groups in future chapters. We classify the things around us so we can get to know our world better. As we learn about living things, we also learn about ourselves and our place in the world. So far, scientists have classified over 1 million different kinds of animals. Most of these are insects. Many scientists think there may be close to 10 million other animals that still have not been classified. That's all for now. Rattenborough over and out. I'll be back in the next chapter to tell you more about how animals are classified into different groups.
So now that you've heard the chapter, let's discuss. How do scientists classify animals? They classify them based on certain characteristics or behaviors. So one thing that a scientist might look for is if an animal has a backbone. If they do, they would call them a vertebrate. Why do scientists classify animals? To better understand animals and how they are alike and different. So now I'm going to do a read aloud, and during this reading, I want you to listen to find out the names of the 5 animal groups. So there are going to be 5 animal groups brought up in this read aloud. Listen close. In the mid-1700s, about 250 years ago, a Swedish man named Carolus Linnaeus became fascinated by the many different ways that people all over the world were grouping animals. Some people grouped animals by how they looked, others grouped them by their habits, and still others by where the animals lived. So Linnaeus decided to use their ideas to create a worldwide system to classify or group animals based on their shared characteristics. This science of classifying organisms is called taxonomy. Say it, taxonomy. Using new ideas and tools, scientists have continued to study organisms and the ways that they are similar and different. Over time, ideas about how to classify animals have changed somewhat. Scientists currently recognize 3 groups of living organisms based on important parts within their cells. Scientists generally agree that these groups of organisms are then divided into kingdoms, the main groups which all living organisms have been further classified. Taxonomists identify animals by their characteristics or special features that set them apart from others. They divide the 5 animal kingdoms into smaller and smaller groups, with each smaller group having more and more in common with one another. Each group has a specific name. For example, we belong to the animal kingdom and to the phylum known as Chordata. Most animals in the phylum Chordata are vertebrates. A vertebrate has a backbone. Do you have a backbone? Yes, you do. That's why we're in the phylum Chordata. Vertebrates belong to the animal kingdom and are in the phylum Chordata. The phylum is divided into even more groups called classes. A class is divided into smaller groups called orders. An order is divided into smaller groups called families. And a family is divided into even smaller groups called genus. And then finally, a genus is divided into smaller groups called species. And that's a word you probably heard most frequently, different species of animals. So there are even more classifications above a species. This is how we group animals. Now that you know what a vertebrate is, an animal with a backbone, what do you think an invertebrate is? That's correct. It's an animal with no backbone. A little more than 95% of all animals on Earth are invertebrates. Think about it. More than 95% of all the species of animals on Earth are invertebrates. That's a lot. And most of them are fairly small. Fewer than 5% of all animal species are vertebrates. That means all vertebrates belong to a very small percentage of all the animals on Earth. Mammals, that includes all humans, are literally just a speck. Taxonomists believe that all of the vertebrate animals on Earth can be classified into one of these 5 animal groups: fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. Even though there are more than 60,000 known species of vertebrates on Earth, there are nearly 1.5 million invertebrates, and 1 million of those are insects. Scientists continue to discover thousands of new insect species each year. How can this be? It's because there are still unexplored areas of the Earth, far into the rainforests, inside the cold ice of glaciers, within the hot lava of volcanoes, and deep down in the ocean. Perhaps one day you will discover new animals yourself, examine and classify them by their different characteristics, and add to our understanding of taxonomy. So let's think about what you've learned today. Scientists classify organisms, including animals, in order to show relationships between them. Vertebrate animals have backbones, where invertebrates do not. Some are warm-blooded, whereas others are cold-blooded. Scientists also consider where animals live, their habitats. Do they live in water or on land? Do they live in warm climates or cold climates? What covers their bodies? Feathers or scales, fur or hair? Do they lay eggs or do they give birth to live creatures that look like smaller versions of themselves? What kinds of food do they eat? Plants, animals, or both? These are all important questions for taxonomists to ask as they work to group animals into categories that are easily studied. So, from our read aloud today, what are the names of the 5 animal groups? You might have seen Miss Goble go, 5 animal groups. There are fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. Those are all the 5 animal groups. So with that, we are going to move into the next portion of our lesson where we discuss parts of speech. You should be familiar with this from 2nd grade, so today is really more just review. We're going to talk about nouns, verbs, and adjectives. So a noun is a person, place, or thing. You've frequently heard Miss Goble say, make sure you capitalize your proper nouns. Those are specific nouns that need to be capitalized. But there are also common nouns that are general and don't need to be capitalized. An adjective is a describing word, and a verb is an action. So what is happening in the sentence? So in this first sentence, we are going to circle the nouns and then draw a wiggly line under the verbs and draw a box around the adjectives. So let's start with the nouns. The nouns in this sentence are cage and birds. We would then want to look for our adjectives, and they frequently are describing a noun, so I would look in front. We see one is an adjective because it's describing how many cages. Colorful is describing birds because it's telling you what type of birds, what they look like. And now let's look for our verbs. Our verb in this sentence is hold. So one cage holds the colorful birds. That's the action word. It's holding the birds. Let's do one more sentence together. Sam rushed to the nearest window. What would be the noun or nouns in this sentence? Sam and window. So we have a proper noun, Sam. That's a name, so it needs to be capitalized. It's a specific person. And then our second noun is window. That's a thing. It's a general noun, a common noun, so it doesn't have to be capitalized. What about our adjectives? Nearest. That's the only adjective in this sentence. It's describing where the window is. So the adjective describes the noun. And finally, let's find our verb. Our verb is rushed. That's what Sam is doing, rushing to the nearest window. So now it's your turn. Your exit ticket today just asks you to examine a couple sentences and determine what's the noun, verb, and adjective in this sentence. You'll notice you might have check boxes sometimes. This means there could be more than one correct answer. So your sentence is Julie put on a sparkling necklace. You need to determine which of those words are the nouns in that sentence. There might be more than one. So do your best. You will have 2 sentences to do this for. When you're done, don't forget to hit submit and then go back to Google Classroom and turn it in. And that's it for today. If you have any questions, feel free to call or text me. Have a great rest of your Tuesday.